Hello, this is Max. This is the last episode of the Chernobyl series, in which you will learn what the causes of the explosion really were, as well as some real facts about the story. Also, don't forget to watch the previous episodes. In the previous episode, after Yelena Komuk's investigation, it was revealed that the cause of the explosion was the pressing of the AZ5 button, which temporarily accelerates the reaction due to the graphite tips. Komuk urged Legasov to tell the world the truth, even if it risks retaliation from the government, as there are many such reactors in the Soviet Union that could explode if the AZ5 button is used. Don't forget to subscribe. For Valery, a scientist, the political complications proved more troubling than dealing with the aftermath of Chernobyl. The authorities immediately began pressuring him to conceal the facts. Shortly thereafter, a trial commenced in the Supreme Court. The plant director, chief engineer, and deputy chief engineer faced charges, while Boris, Valery, and Yelena served as critical witnesses. As each took their turn to testify, the hidden realities started to come to light. First to testify was Boris, who disclosed that the reactor which exploded had been prematurely put into operation. He revealed that the plant director and others had deliberately falsified the completion documents to meet year-end targets and curry favor with their superiors. Despite failing a crucial test 3 times before the acceptance inspection, the leadership, instead of addressing the errors, proceeded with a risky 4th test that ultimately triggered the Chernobyl disaster. After Boris, Yelena took the stand, elaborating on the circumstances surrounding the 4th test. Originally planned for daytime, the local power grid's requirements pushed the test to a midnight schedule when power demand was lower. Despite the suboptimal conditions, the plant management, eager for a quick completion, did not postpone the test. Compounding the situation, there were recent staff changes at the plant. The plant director was preparing to depart, and both the chief and deputy chief engineers were set to advance in their positions, contingent on demonstrating successful performance outcomes. Consequently, the test was inappropriately assigned to the night shift, whose workers lacked the necessary experience and found operating instructions perplexing. Valery followed, testifying about the deputy chief engineer, Dyatlov, who was supervising the lab on the night of the disaster. His approach to the crucial test was alarmingly dismissive as he sought to complete the work swiftly. Dyatlov ignored questions from his subordinates and bypassed established procedures to expedite the process, even issuing unauthorized orders. The reactor's operation depended on the interaction between its heating and cooling devices to maintain appropriate power levels for electricity generation. However, under Dyatlov's misguided directives, the delicate balance between the heating and cooling devices was disrupted, leading to a severe drop in reactor power. In response, the engineers on duty initially decided to shut down the reactor and wait for 24 hours, a step that was deemed appropriate under the circumstances. However, Dyatlov, driven by his ambition for a swift promotion, disregarded these safety protocols. He insisted on reheating the reactor immediately, even threatening his subordinates with job loss if they failed to comply. It was Dyatlov's critical misjudgment that set everyone on an irreversible course. Under his directive, the technicians nearly withdrew all the control rods, pushing the reactor to the brink. By this point, even the computer system had signaled an urgent warning to shut down the reactor, highlighting the severity of the situation. Despite the perilous rise in reactor power and the absence of control rods to stabilize the reaction, Dyatlov persisted with the test. Within seconds, the power levels soared past their safe limits. At this critical juncture, the only viable option left was to activate the emergency shutdown mechanism. However, due to substandard practices in the construction of the control rods, a result of cost-cutting measures by Soviet authorities, engaging the emergency button proved catastrophic, effectively triggering an explosion akin to detonating the nuclear power station. Valery exposed the underlying truth of the Chernobyl disaster, attributing the initial layer of causation to the negligence of the plant director and his team. Dyatlov's authoritarian decision-making further exacerbated the situation, transforming the reactor into a veritable nuclear weapon. The root cause, however, was traced back to the Soviet regime's cost-cutting during construction and their intentional obfuscation of these deficiencies. Moreover, Valery's revelations carried an urgent warning. Similar design flaws existed in 16 other Soviet reactors, 3 of which were ominously close to Chernobyl, less than 20 kilometers away. He stressed the critical need for immediate rectification of these flaws, highlighting that without intervention, each reactor remained a potential nuclear threat. Through his testimony, Valery not only shed light on the catastrophic events but also risked his own safety to alert the world to the ongoing danger. After revealing the unsettling truths, what awaited Valery was not commendation, but confinement. This scientist, who had dedicated immense effort to addressing the Chernobyl disaster and had saved many lives, found himself punished more severely than if he had received the death penalty. High-ranking officials personally delivered his sentence, declaring that everything he had articulated in court would neither be acknowledged by the state nor covered by any media outlets. All his protests and disclosures were rendered futile. From that point on, his words would carry no weight. His contributions would be trivialized by those driven by pettiness, and he would be relegated to a life of obscurity, ultimately dying isolated and forgotten. Despite his prowess in solving complex scientific problems, he found himself utterly outmatched by the deceitful intricacies of political maneuvering. After the trial, Valery was covertly whisked away, with Boris and Yelena watching from a distance, knowing they would never see their friend again. On the 26th of April, 1988, Valery Legasov committed an unimaginable act upon himself at the age of 51, exactly 2 years after the disaster. He made a tape recording before his death, and afterwards, his words could not be ignored, prompting Soviet officials to acknowledge the design flaws of the RBMK reactor. Subsequently, all reactors in the country were upgraded, and Legasov's act literally prevented potential future catastrophes. The character Yelena Kumyuk was created as a composite of the scientists who aided Legasov, some of whom were also condemned for supporting the truth he spoke. Boris Sherbina died in 1990, 4 years and 4 months after the disaster events. Viktor Bryukhanov, Anatoly Dyatlov, and Nikolai Fomin were sentenced to 10 years in prison. Anatoly Dyatlov died in 1995 from illnesses related to radiation. The clothing worn by firefighters who extinguished the reactor that night is still in the basement of a hospital and remains highly radioactive. After the disaster, Lyudmila Ignatenko suffered strokes and was told she could not have children, but she managed to give birth to a son. Everyone who watched the fire from a bridge died of radiation. This bridge was named the Bridge of Death. 400 miners worked around the clock for a month. About 100 of them did not live to the age of 40. 3 divers who went under the reactor survived. Contrary to predictions of rapid death, 2 of them are still alive today. Over 600,000 people were involved in the cleanup of the disaster. Over 300,000 were relocated, being told it was temporary. In 2006, Mikhail Gorbachev stated that the Chernobyl nuclear power plant accident might have been the true cause of the Soviet Union's collapse. The number of victims varies from 4,000 to 93,000 people, but according to official Soviet data, 31 people died. We may never know the whole truth. The Chernobyl disaster is the largest man-made disaster in the world. Eternal memory to all the disaster liquidators.